Hey team, and welcome to another video in the Astrological Magical Elections video series. Today we're going to talk about those magical electional opportunities that we have available to us between this Virgo Full Moon on February 26th until the Pisces New Moon on March 13th. So we actually have a little bit to talk about this time, not like 2 weeks, two-ish times ago when we had nothing to really talk about. So we're going to go ahead and get started with Western Europe, who kind of won our coin toss, for which there's only a couple of charts that are kind of similarly themed, which is kind of interesting. So let's go ahead and kind of dive right into it. Our first election opportunity for the Western European continent is going to be for March 3rd at around 6:30. This chart here is set for 6:39 or 6:29 p.m. And this is going to be an opportunity for an 18th Lunar Mansion talisman. So the 18th Lunar Mansion is one that is a healing talisman, a talisman for healing primarily. But it is more of like the devouring the illness type of healing modality than some of our other mansions, which are a bit more like reinforcing the body or, like invigorating the vital force or things like that. More of like building up the body. This is more of like a consuming and destroying the disease type of thing. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend this for, say, preventative medicine, like a preventative health talisman. This isn't going to super fit that bill, but if you are already dealing with an illness that you want to get better, this is the mansion for you. Traditionally, the texts tell us that the 18th Lunar Mansion specifically is for diseases of the belly, but like in my experience, it's helped with other things not exactly related to the belly. So it may do especially well with kind of stomach type problems, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, things like that. But I've found it to be very helpful in other things as well. So just kind of keep that in mind. So taking a look at our election for this chart, we've got the moon here placed in the third house, which is the house of her joy, in this mansion. And at this time, she's applying this trine to the sun. So, I've said it a million times for people who've watched this series for a while, you'll know the moon's trines or sextiles with the suns. I always really prefer to get those if we can, like if other chart factors allow us to do that. I like having those charts. They tend to be the best ones. Just because the sun is very empowering generally, but also in regards to like health and healing, well, the sun is all about that. So being able to have this connection here is awesome as well. Looking at, our Lord of the first house is our first house in Virgo, which points down to Mercury down here in Aquarius. And Mercury's doing okay. We got this conjunction with Jupiter. And we're kind of far enough away from Saturn here to not have to worry about that. Not quite to the square of Mars yet either. So all in all, Mercury's sort of in a safe space, conjoined with the greater benefic as well, which makes it a fairly safe election for it. Now, of course, the moon being cadent is not super fun, even if she's in the house of her joy. And there might be a little bit of like a concern here about the symbolism with the sun setting. But we have an alternative, kind of, if this is not quite what you're looking for, or you're not quite comfortable with this election to use it. But my Western European audience, you've been watching this series for a while. You have a certain taste, a certain eye for quality, for good quality elections. And that last one, though interesting and something you may be wanting to get your hands on, isn't that the election didn't quite sit with you well for whatever reason. Totally understand. So I offer you this. This for March 8th at around 4:40 in the morning. And this is an opportunity for a 23rd Lunar Mansion talisman. The 23rd Mansion is one that I don't think I've talked about throughout the entire history of this series. But the 23rd Lunar Mansion is one that is very similar in some ways to the 18th Lunar Mansion. Whereas the 18th Lunar Mansion is a little bit more focused in health. More specifically, it can do other things. The 24th Lunar Mansion is a bit more... has a bit more general powers, I guess, more spread out, more things it can do, but it kind of has that same swallowing, devouring kind of power that the 18th Lunar Mansion kind of shares. There's some overlap here, and it can also be the 23rd Lunar Mansion. Can also be utilized for healing and health in much the same way. But this one, I think, actually provides a superior chart for this. So taking a look at it, we've got the moon angular in the 23rd Lunar Mansion, which is very great. And she's applying that sextile to the sun. Again, the trine to sextiles to the sun. Have to get them if we can. While the Lord of the first house, the first house is in Capricorn, is going to be Saturn here, also in the first house, not poorly aspected by Mars, not combust the sun, just kind of hanging out here in its sign of Aquarius. So between the two charts, if you only have or only want to do one, I do think that the 23rd Lunar Mansion chart is superior. It's safer in a lot of ways. But of course, if you're unable to make this one, if you don't want to get up at 4:30 to get ready for it, totally understand. Then the 18th Lunar Mansion one that I showed previously, it'll do the job, but it's not as good. It's not as solid as an election as this one. So now hopping over to Australia, we're going to take a look at our first election opportunity for the Australian continent. And this is going to happen on March 2nd at around 2:30 in the morning. This is set for 2:29. And here we're going to have an opportunity for a 16th Lunar Mansion talisman. Now, the 16th Lunar Mansion is one that is primarily about buying and selling. It's more commerce-oriented. So you can actually kind of take advantage of this a little bit depending on how you want to play it, because the moon phase here can be important. So right now, because we're going from a full moon to a new moon, we're of course dealing with a waning phase. And waning phase astral magic is a little bit different than waxing phase astral magic. When the waxing phase, we're more interested on growth, increase, and gain, and in the waning phase, we're a little bit more interested in like giving back and getting rid of things and diminishment in some ways. So taking a look at our elections that we talked about for Western Europe, those talismans were health oriented, which is typically something that is more waxing moon period, but they are specifically talismans that their method of healing that is more waning moon oriented, because it's about devouring and diminishing, more so than it is about like building up and strengthening, which is something that we more usually see in like the 10th or the 22nd Lunar Mansion, I'm sorry. They're a bit more about building up and strengthening. So they're more waxing phase healing talismans, whereas the 18th and the 23rd are more waning phase. So the 16th Lunar Mansion, because it's like a more commerce-oriented, more transactional, it can be either, kind of depending on which side of the fence you're on, right? But even then, like, it's kind of tricky. So like waxing phase 16th Lunar Mansion talismans would be something that you would use if you were trying to buy something, like if you're trying to get a good deal on something, if you were shopping around for something, like trying to make a big important purchase, like maybe trying to purchase a home or real estate or like a car, or just something that you want to get a good deal on, something that you have very specific specifications for, or that you intend to use for a while, some sort of, even something that's more like, professional grade equipment or something like that. 16th Lunar Mansion can be for, but it can also be used if you're trying to gain a profit on stuff. So you still have kind of that gain, that accumulation that you see with waxing moons. Waning Moon 16th Mansion talisman is a little bit more about like getting rid of something. So this is you as the seller of a thing that you're trying to kind of get rid of. And trying to, ideally, if you're going to do something, you want to make money off of it, which makes it a little bit more in the waxing moon phase period, which is why I was like, oh, it's a little tricky sometimes. But it's really about kind of your mindset a bit. So when we're talking about the 16th Lunar Mansion in a waning chart, or in a waning moon phase, this is one where it's like, I'm trying to sell a house. I'm trying to sell this piece of property that I'm just trying to I'm trying to be rid of because it's a burden to me in some sense. And, of course you want to make your money on it. So this would be really good. I guess really the point that I'm trying to make is like the 16th Lunar Mansion for a waning phase is not something that you should go to, that you should really count on if you're somebody who sells things for a living, like if you have a business where you sell goods that you make or anything like that, then you want to do more of a waxing 16th Lunar Mansion talisman, because then it's more long-term, it's more profit, it's more making money oriented, right? But a waning moon phase can be great if you're not, like, if that's not really what you're doing, if you're just selling something kind of as like a one-off or things like that. Like if you're just trying to sell something on like Facebook Marketplace or whatever people use these days. This could be, this would be what you want to utilize, because it's more about giving away, getting rid of. Alternatively, you could also use this one to like diminish debts and have like debts reduced and forgiven. So don't forget about that too. This can be another really great option to utilize. Maybe if enough of us make it in the United States. Oh, this is a European one or an Australian one. Dang. Oh wait, no. North America has one too. Maybe if enough of us make this, the Biden administration will cancel student loan debt. But anyway, taking a look at our election for this, for Australia, the moon is placed here in the 16th Lunar Mansion, conjoined the midheaven, right where we want her. Oh, but you have to be really careful here, because as you can see, the moon is at 12 degrees Libra in 53 minutes. The 16th Lunar Mansion begins at 12 degrees Libra and 51 minutes. So you have to be careful. Don't go too early. You'll be in a 15th Lunar Mansion one, and that one is much more of a waxing moon oriented one, and you'll lose money. You don't want to do that. So make sure that you wait until the moon is at 12 degrees Libra and 53 minutes or 52, but you have to be past 51 minutes. Very important. And at this time, the moon is applying a trine to Mercury. Oh, that's a bad line. The moon is applying a trine to Mercury. That's a better line. And Mercury is a good planet for these kinds of things. Mercury is very transactional. Mercury is about commerce and trade, so a good fit here for this. We're kind of a little close to this conjunction with Saturn, but we're much closer to the conjunction with Jupiter, which is much more stabilizing, giving energy, so very good there. The Lord of the first house is Saturn. We have got the Capricorn rising. Saturn's here in the first house. Not square Mars, not conjoin the sun or anything terrible like that. All in all, pretty standard, kind of one of the more typical Lunar Mansion talismans that we talk about here. Our next opportunity for the Australian continent is going to be March 4th at around 3 in the morning. This chart is set for exactly like 3:01. And this is going to be an opportunity for that 18th Lunar Mansion talisman. Again, this is a talisman that is more health-oriented, but is more diminishing by sort of like diminishing the disease. So kind of like swallowing the sickness kind of a thing. Not very good for preventative medicine or for strengthening the body, making it stronger, more resistant or resilient to disease in the first place. This is not that. This is for, I'm sick, I'm not well, I need something to help me get rid of this and to get better. Here, we've got the moon placed in the 18th Lunar Mansion. I forgot which mansion I was on. In the 18th Lunar Mansion, in the 10th house, so angular, but not quite as angular as I normally like her, closer to the midheaven degree itself. And here at this time, she's applying that trine to the sun. Always really great when we can get the sun to trine the moon in our Lunar Mansion talismans. Well, for most of them, I guess there are a few where it's not that great. But for health-oriented ones, I'm very pro sun-moon aspects. While the sun is here, our ruler of the first house is Saturn, ruler of Aquarius, who is itself an Aquarius. Very strong in its sign, very strong by being very angular in the house, or being angular because it's during the ascendant. Just kind of the same thing as last time where we talked about the Capricorn ascendant and Saturn ruling that, not square Mars, not conjoined the sun, not being messed with by any other kind of malefic influence. So hopefully this 18th mansion election, I think is better situated than the same election that it was in the Western European section of the video, primarily because the ruler of the first house is much better placed, but also because the sun is not kind of straddling that descendant and going into like the setting mode here. We're coming up to the morning rising, which has much better implications for health and wellness than a setting sun. So overall, this one is much better between those two comparatively, but still kind of just like kind of the difference that different places of the world have. Like this is the difference that they make sometimes in our elections. So our third and final election opportunity for the Australian continent is going to be for March 3rd at around 4:05 a.m. So a lot of early rising for Australia this time around, and this is going to be for a Deneb Al-Jidi talisman. So Deneb Al-Jidi is the 15th of the 15 Bohemian fixed stars, and this is a star that is primarily focused on kind of like wealth, protection, and preservation and growth. In a lot of ways, Deneb Al-Jidi is sort of like the prime investment star, in that it is able to keep and safeguard investments and ensure that they grow well. So Deneb Al-Jidi could be a really great talisman to utilize for somebody who is interested in or already involved in like stock trading or like investment portfolios. But it's primarily focused like a little bit more on, because the stock market and kind of investing in that sense is fairly modern. Deneb Al-Jidi in the kind of traditional sense is talked about more about its ability to protect and preserve and increase the desirability and value of property is really kind of the main thing that it's about. But of course, time moves on, people make money different ways, and of course, magic kind of develops or updates itself to kind of keep up with it, and investment trading and things like that are something that are already fairly well under the Deneb Al-Jidi umbrella. So still very useful if you're working on that. But Deneb Al-Jidi can also be utilized for like protection of property, kind of specifically, well, not specifically, but just like as an example, protection from fire, from flood damage, from water damage, protection from, damage during natural disasters or storms and things like that. So Deneb LGD is overall like a pretty good fixed star talisman to get a hold of, because it can be utilized in a lot of different ways. You've got the wealth accumulation part of it and investment trading part of it. You've got the safety of the home, and then there's also it has another usage for like safety and protection from litigation, or coming out on top in litigation, which I don't really see as like as a personally, I don't really see that part as like a very kind of significant part of the Deneb LGD kind of personality, but it is there. It is useful for that as well, even though I think of it more along the lines of like protection of the home, and for protection of the wallet, essentially. So taking a look at our election here that we've got the star rising on the ascendant. Deneb LGD is at 23 degrees Aquarius, I'm sorry. And the moon is here applying to the conjunction of that star, but will also apply to the conjunction of Mercury. Deneb LGD is a star that is of the nature of Saturn and Mercury, so the moon applying to one of those two planets is exactly what we are looking for. The only kind of meh downside about this is that we've got the ruler of the first house is Saturn, who's in the 12th house in this chart, which I don't super love. But Saturn's not otherwise afflicted. It's not square Mars. It's not, it's not conjoined Saturn or anything like that. I'm sorry, Saturn's not conjoined Saturn. Saturn's not conjoined the sun or anything like that. So it kind of just depends on how you feel about Saturn, about the Lord of the first house being more cadent in the 12th house. I don't super love it. But having an opportunity for a Deneb LGD talisman with Mercury, with one of the planets that is of the nature of this star on top of the star, is a pretty rare occurrence. So I think that may overcome some of like the hesitancy or the non-idealness of Saturn being in the 12th house. But of course, that is up to you to decide, however you feel about it. So our next electional opportunity for the Australian continent is going to be for March 10th at around 2:13 a.m. And this is going to be for a Saturn planetary talisman. So let's take a look at the election really quickly, because planetary talismans are a little bit more difficult to talk about, like what they can do, because a lot of people purchase or pursue planetary talismans in order to kind of fix or remediate some inherent natal problem. That's mostly why people go for them. And that will depend based on the nativity, so it's kind of hard to talk about them more generally, even though you can also use planetary talismans to kind of like take advantage of, even though that's not a really great way to say it, kind of planetary universal significations as well. But let's talk about the elections really quickly because it's a little bit interesting. So here we've got Saturn in Aquarius, angular towards the ascendant, with the moon applying the conjunction to the planet. Mars is not in a square. The Saturn is not afflicted by the sun. The Lord of the first house is fine because the Lord of the first house is Saturn. It's also Saturn's hour at this time. But our window in this election is actually kind of small. It goes from about 2:13 a.m. to when Aquarius starts rising to 2:27 a.m. when the hour switches from the hour of Saturn to the hour of Jupiter. But that's okay. So not only, you may be quick and you may be able to whip up a thing real fast, but like, Saturn talisman, done. But there's also an alternative time that you can use later that day, where those moon and Saturn come closer to the midheaven. And we would start that time at around 8:23 in the morning. And this is when the Saturn hour starts, because you've already got the moon applying the conjunction to Saturn. Saturn's already, in Aquarius still. I'm going to be there for a bit. And they are coming towards the midheaven. Right now, at this time, the ruler of the first house is Mars, who's down here in Gemini, not afflicted by Saturn. Not conjoin the sun. There's no, big bad reason why we can't utilize Mars at this time, so that's fine. And this window here will go from 8:23 to around 9:23, and this is that chart. At this point, the Saturn hour ends, and we go into the Jupiter hour. So we want to make sure that we get it during a Saturn hour, because this does happen during a Wednesday. So it's either going to be Mars's day in that first chart before the sun rises, or Mercury's day after the sun rises in this chart here. So we want to make sure we have the Saturn hour. So moving on into our North American continent, we're going to have our first election opportunity is going to be for March 8th. at around 3:30 in the morning, and this is going to be an opportunity for the 23rd Lunar Mansion. And the 23rd Lunar Mansion is a mansion that I've not got to talk about before in this series, but the 23rd Lunar Mansion is a mansion that is a little bit more malefic in its energy, but we can kind of funnel that into a good thing, in that while the 23rd Lunar Mansion does have kind of like a vast, destructive, diminishing, swallowing powers, it also has a more specific power for healing. So the 23rd Lunar Mansion is one that it's a good healing talisman if you're already sick, and that will help to reduce and diminish disease. But it's not a very good healing talisman if you are not sick, and that it is not a talisman that is programmed for like preventative medicine or for strengthening the body or anything like that. It is specifically for, hey, I'm not feeling well, or I struggle with this chronic disease. Let's reduce this. Let's get rid of this as best as we can. And that's really what the 23rd Lunar Mansion is about. So that's why we're using it while the moon is waning here. So looking at our election, we've got the moon in the 23rd Lunar Mansion conjoined the ascendant here, very angular, and at the same time she's applying this sextile to the sun. The sun is a very healthful, giving planet, so I always really enjoy the moon's aspects with the sun, especially when we're talking about healing the body or healing anything or making anything better. The sun is really good for that because the sun is a planet that represents, the vital force of health and life and light in the world, of course. At the same time, we've got the ruler of the first house, because we have Capricorn rising, is Saturn here in Aquarius in the first house, in a sign that it rules, in a very nice house. Saturn is not afflicted by Mars. Saturn is not afflicted by the sun. Overall, a pretty decent election chart for the 23rd Lunar Mansion. So our next election opportunity for the North American continent, kind of going back in time because I skipped it, is going to be for March 1st at around 2:30 in the morning. And this is going to be an opportunity for an Algorab fixed star talisman. So Algorab is a star in the Corvus constellation, the Crow. So Algorab is one of my more favorite of the Bohemian stars. Algorab is the choleric star. It's a star that is specifically said to increase the choleric humor. So it makes individuals more bold and courageous, helps them to stand up for themselves, helps people to get better self-esteem, and can generally be very useful as like a long-term remedial medicinal talisman for individuals who have a strong imbalance towards the phlegmatic humor, or even the melancholic humor, I guess, in their natal temperament, or otherwise struggle with sort of more long-term phlegmatic type diseases or illnesses. Algorab can be very helpful for. Algorab is also something of an exorcist talisman, not as much as, say, Vega, but it can still up there, still worth mentioning. Algorab can be very helpful for individuals who are struggling with, lingering malefica or, negative energy that they've sort of accumulated somehow or have run up against, or even against sort of like difficult or kind of scary spirit activity that they just kind of want rid of. Or to help to solve the situation for Algorab can be very helpful with that as well. So I definitely recommend grabbing an Algorab talisman if whenever there's an opportunity for it, such as today. Well, March 1st. So taking a look at our electional chart, we've got the midheaven at 13 degrees Libra, which is around the fixed star Algorab, with the moon applying to the conjunction of this degree. And at the same time, the moon is applying a trine to Saturn here in Aquarius. So, be super careful. So if you're somewhere who is more west of me in the Mountain or Pacific time zones, make sure that the moon is still applying to Saturn, because after this, the moon will apply to Mercury. And Algorab is this star that is of the nature of Saturn and Mars. So you want to be one of those two planets. At the same time, we've got the ruler of the first house, who is Jupiter, with Sagittarius on the ascendant here, who's in the middle of Aquarius, not conjoined Saturn anymore, got that weight off its shoulders, and is no longer square Mars. So all in all, a pretty safe standard Aquarius. Could be more angular, but hey, beggars can't be choosers. Overall, a pretty standard fixed star talismanic framework here. All right, so those were all of our opportunities for magical elections for this 2-week period. Hopefully everybody gets something that they can, utilize and get some use out of. And if not, hopefully next time we meet again on the Pisces New Moon, there'll be something that more specifically suits, your needs or goals. So everyone, take care. Have a great Have a great full moon and a great lunation period. And I'll see everybody again on the Pisces new moon.